Today's lesson is on area and perimeter of 2D shapes, and we're going to focus on squares, rectangles and triangles today. So you will have seen how to find the area and perimeter of these shapes lower down the school. So today's lesson is just a quick revision exercise. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the perimeter of a 2D shape, which is the distance around the outside of the shape. So quite simple to calculate. We simply add up all the lengths that we have in the shape. So add up the length of each side to find the total perimeter, the total distance around the outside of the shape. Units for perimeter are just our units of measurement for length. So it could be millimeters, centimeters, meters, kilometers, or any measurement that we could use to measure length. Area, on the other hand, of a 2D shape is how much space is inside the shape, so how much space a shape takes up rather than the distance around the outside of it. There isn't a simple way to just find the area of a shape, and each of the three shapes that we're going to look at today has its own formula to calculate the area. When we are finding the area of a shape, rather than just millimeters, centimeters, meters, etc., the units that we're going to use are square units. Examples of square units are square millimeters, square centimeters, square meters, or square kilometers. So any unit that has that little 2 above it, a squared sign, tells us that we are talking about area. So the three shapes that we're going to look at today are squares, rectangles and triangles. And to find the area of each of these, as you'll probably remember from when you've done these before, they all have their own individual formula. So if we take the first one, we'll start with the rectangle. The formula for the area of a rectangle is length times breadth, which we can just abbreviate to L times B. And we have length and breadth. So if you have a rectangle question and you have two numbers in the question, to find the area, you multiply those together. For a square, it's very similar, but the difference between a square and a rectangle is that in a square, all the sides have the same length. So we can use this little line here to denote that all of these lengths are the same. So in a square, we don't really have a length and a breadth, we just have a length. So to find the area of a square, you take the length and multiply it by itself. And another way to write that is L squared, or length squared. Lastly, for the triangle, the formula that we're going to use is area equals a half times B, which represents the base of the triangle, times H, which represents the height of the triangle. The reason that we introduce the half here is because if we can imagine the triangle is half of a rectangle. So if we were to go to a rectangle and put a dotted line down the middle of it, each side would be a triangle. So that's our formula for area of a triangle. So each slide for square, rectangle and triangle is going to be split down the middle, and one side is going to be a perimeter question and one side is going to be an area question. So the first one says, if the perimeter of a square is 264 centimetres, find the length of one of its sides. And we know that in a square, all the sides have the same length. So if the perimeter of the square is 264 centimetres, then the length of just one of those sides has to be 264 divided by 4. You can try and do that in your head, but what I would probably do just for quickness is a bus stop sum and just divide 264 by 4 that way, especially because a lot of the questions that you're going to do in this exercise will be non-calculator, because the numbers are quite manageable to do without a calculator. So I would try and get as comfortable as you can doing these sorts of sums. So if we do it that way, we end up with an answer of 66 centimetres. For the second example, we've been asked to find the area of the square. We have that the length given is 9 centimetres, and we know because it's a square that all of the sides have the same length, and we can mark that with those little lines there. So to find the area of the square, we're always going to put down our formula first. So L squared, or length times length, whatever way you want to put it. So A equals 9 squared, which is just 9 times 9, and that works out to be 81, and the units are square centimetres. So if you're thinking about 3 things for all of the area questions to make sure you're doing, first thing is the formula. So always copy down your formula. The second thing is to sub your numbers in. So make sure that you have a line where you're replacing the letters in the formula with the numbers that you've been given in the question. And then the third thing is an answer with units. So make sure that every single question that you're answering for this whole week has an answer with units, whether those are just centimetres or metres, or whether they're square centimetres or square metres. So every answer has to have units. The second set of questions relate to the perimeter and area of a rectangle, so not too dissimilar to the square that we've just looked at. The first one tells us that if the perimeter of this rectangle is 92 centimetres, we're being asked to find L, so we're being asked to find this missing length up here. So if we know that the length over on this side is 10 centimetres, then we can fill in that over on the left hand side, this length here is also 10 centimetres. So just on the left hand side and the right hand side, we've already used up 20 of the 92 centimetres that make up the perimeter of this shape. So to find what's left over, 92 take away 20, which is 72. But 72 isn't this length up here. 72 is this length plus this length. So to find what L centimetres is, we just do 72 divided by 2, which is 36 centimetres. And on the right hand side, part A asks us to find the area of this rectangle here. So we have one side that's 1.5 metres and one side that's 4 metres. So if we think about the list of steps that I gave you in the last slide, first thing is to copy down the formula, so A equals L times B. Second thing is to substitute your numbers in. So 1.5 times 4. You can do a sum for this, but it's probably easy enough to do in your head. So 1.5 times 4 gives you 6, and our units for area are square metres because the lengths are measured in metres. So that's part A. And part B says if the rectangle is a floor to be tiled and each square metre of tiling costs £17.50, find the cost of tiling the floor. So we'll just pretend that that says floor. Okay. So we know that 1 square metre costs £17.50, but what we need is 6 square metres. So the sum that we're going to do is £17.50 times 6. And again, we're trying to get really comfortable with doing non-calculator sums here. So we're going to work it out in a chimney sum and say 0 times 6 is 0, 5 times 6 is 30, so put the 3 down, 7 times 6 is 42, add the 3 is 45, 1 times 6 is 6, and plus the 4 is 10, and stick your decimal point in. So the answer to tile the floor is £105. Our last set of examples is to do with perimeter and area of triangles. So the first one here says find the perimeter of the triangle, and we know that a triangle has 3 sides, but here we've only been given 2 of them. But what's interesting about this triangle is that we have these little red lines here and here. And what that tells us is that those sides are the same length. It tells us that we have an isosceles triangle. So if the side on the right hand side is 6.2 centimetres, then so is the side on the left hand side. And if we add those sides together, we'll get the perimeter of the triangle. So P equals 6.2 plus 6.2 plus 5.1. And I would try and do this in my head. I would add the whole numbers together and then the decimal parts together. So 6 plus 6 is 12, plus 5 is 17. And then the 0.2, 0.2 and 0.1 add together to give you 0.5. And just remember that for perimeter it's just centimetres, that is your unit. And the last example asks us to find the area of this triangle. So our area formula for a triangle is A equals a half times the base times the height. But what we have here is not just the base and the height, but we've been given the third side as well, and we only need two of them. So what you have to do is look at the three numbers, think about the numbers that you want for the formula, and then exclude the third one. So we're looking for the base of the triangle, which is down here, and the height of the triangle, which is this here. So the side that we can exclude is the 13, because that's neither the base or the height. So we've written down our formula, and now we'll substitute our numbers in. And at this point, there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. So you can do 5 times 12 and half your answer. Or what I would probably recommend is looking for a number here that is an even number that you can half first of all, just to make your numbers a little bit smaller. So rather than doing 5 times 12 and half in it, what I would do is I would say, well, a half of 12 is 6. And then just do 6 times 5, which is 30 centimetres squared, and that's going to be the easiest way to do that without a calculator. Obviously 5 times 12 isn't that hard a sum to do, but if the numbers were much bigger, pick one of the numbers that's an even number. Don't choose an odd one, because if we half the 5, we'd be left with 2.5, and then we're going to have to do 2.5 times 12, which isn't easy without a calculator. Pick one of the numbers that's even and half that, and that will give you an easier sum to do. So our answer there is 30 square centimetres.